All right. We're going to have a little discussion, a little panel discussion on what it means to be a disciple-making pastor, disciple-making church. We're going to talk about the challenges, the victories, all of those things in the local church. And we have some incredible local church pastors that are supposed to be up here now, and some other leaders. So you guys know who you are. Come on up, and we're going to get this underway. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself real quick. We have kind of a short amount of time on this panel discussion, but if you would introduce yourself, Mark, if you go ahead and start, just your name and your church where you're serving.
I am Mark Gainey, and I serve at Fultondale First Baptist.
My name is Andy Frazier, and I serve at Grace Baptist Church in Summerton, Alabama.
My name is Eric Taylor. I am serving at Bethel Baptist Church in Pleasant Grove, Alabama.
My name is Mark Hodges. I'm pastor of First Baptist Church, Thorsby, Alabama, which is central of the state. Chilton County is where we are.
My name is Larry Heitch, and I work with the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions, and I serve all of your churches in Alabama.
There you go. And I'm at Crossroads Community Church down in Elmore. I'm Robert Mullins. So I'll be asking the questions, not talking to the stuff, but here we go. You ready? So one of the questions we've talked about for years that we hear in conferences like this is, I have one problem, and that I'm a pastor, but I've never been discipled. What's the answer?
Be discipled. That's the answer. I would say seek out somebody to disciple you, and that may be, I guess, a challenge in and of itself, except that you are here and look around you. And there are lots of pastors in this room right now that would be willing and probably excited to disciple you. In fact, I know of at least 6 people on this platform that would be that way.
And it's not impossible, because some people may think, I can't find anybody. My story is, early on in ministry, I sought out 30 guys that I know of, that I have actual factual evidence that I called or wrote letters to or paid a visit to their churches. Some of them you may even know, who I got turned down time after time. I got ghosted, as the kids say these days. But God did not discourage me through that. As a matter of fact, I think he just built a passion for me to make sure I was going to pass that along to other people. So it's not impossible. And like Mark said, whether you're live with us here in the room or watching online, reach out to us if that's where your heart is. We want to make sure that happens.
Yeah, that's good. Another on the same kind of idea, being a pastor of a church, being a leader of the church, and I know, there's multiple leadership levels in this room, not just pastors, but I do want you to think about that for just a second. And the question would be this: how do I add something else to my busy lifestyle? How, I'm busy, I'm in the trenches, I'm doing this church thing, and you're telling me that I've got to start discipling a group of people. So how do I add that to my lifestyle?
I think one of the things that we did is learned a couple of years ago that everybody has to eat. So when you eat, you can disciple. You can meet. I meet a guy every week. One of our groups I meet on Sunday evening, and then one fella I meet with once a week, and we eat lunch together because I like to eat lunch and he likes to eat lunch, and we like the Bible, so we eat lunch and we talk. So that's time that you already have. So.
Or if you have any other kind of interest, if you're a pastor and you reach out to someone else to actually begin the discipling, do you golf? I don't golf. Some pastors do. It's weird, isn't it? Some of us drink coffee. I know me and one of the guys that I hang out with, we meet regularly at a really cool coffee place that they like geek out on coffee. They'll drink it out of beakers. It's strange, but it's where we connect. So just find some kind of common ground to meet.
Let me also encourage you, don't use the excuse that you don't have time, because you do. You have time to do anything that's important to you. I'm actually bivocational. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not. Not only am I a pastor, but I run a small business, and it keeps me pretty busy. I have small kids, and I make sure that there's time allotted in my schedule that I set aside to invest in other people. Some of my groups meet at 5:30 a.m. on a weekday, because the guys that I disciple, they have jobs and they have families too. So in the evenings, schedules are crazy. Weekends, things are going on. So 5:30 in the morning, we meet, and it's fantastic. So you can find time if you want to make time to do it.
And I think something that's important that I failed at miserably for a long time, and I feel like most of what I'm going to tell you is because I learned it the hard way, but it's not, and you've heard it probably 100 times already today, it's not a program. So it's not another ministry add-on. It's life. I mean, this is what we do. We make disciples. It's part of life. And so it has to be a rhythm of your life, no matter what you're doing, when you're doing it, where you're doing it. It's life on life. We're doing life together when we're making disciples. And so to say you don't have time to make disciples, to me, it's like, okay, well, you don't have time for life, because this is our life. So
Just curious, you talking about that formal training. Who's had formal training in seminary, college, something like that in ministry? Just looking out. Okay, here's the question, and it piggybacks right off what you said, Mark. You talked about the idea of the program base versus process base, kind of thing. Talk about the idea that if we're going to be disciple making churches, probably for the most of us, we're going to have to, the change word is going to have to come in there, and we're going to have to begin to shift the culture. How does that look, and how does that play out?
why is everybody looking at each other? You go to Scott Kindig's roundtable and you learn how to do that. That's what he talked about.
So you're talking about, for a brief answer, how do we initiate culture change in our church?
Yes.
Slowly.
Yes. It does not happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. That's the thing. Especially if you're in a more established church, you can't go in and say, I just came back from this incredible conference, and here, let me just do all of this within the next 2 weeks because we've got to make disciples. It may be that you go find someone that is from the same tribe that speaks the same language, and you just spend time with them, and it's just a one-on-one or 1-2 people, and you just spend time pouring into them and help them to see that they need to go and do that with other folks. And eventually, over time, you have to speak language, because words create worlds, and you have to do it slowly, and you have to do it consistently. And so as you do that, the culture will eventually begin to shift. It's not a speedboat. It's more like a cruise ship, and you're just going to be really, really, really slow.
And you don't need permission to do that. We've already been given that by Jesus. So just start making disciples.
I think one of the things that we did as we intentionally invested in people that were hungry, those people began to serve on, we're a traditional church, we're First Baptist, we've got a committee or 2 or more, but those people that had been discipled started serving on those committees, and now they are the leaders of those committees. And so because of that, the culture is beginning to change. That takes a long time, but and to be honest, it wasn't that I did it intentionally. It just started happening that way. And then we started thinking, oh, we probably need to do more of that. And so now the leaders of our committees, deacon chair, have been discipled. And so that now our decision-making process are being made by people who look at things from a kingdom aspect, from a disciple-making aspect.
Throw in there too, from the student ministry aspect, this is exactly what happened the last student ministry that I served a few years ago, it took us a while. I had basically inherited a student ministry that was very much entertainment driven. And it was that era of just just kind of keep our kids entertained, keep them busy, do a lot of stuff with them. But the people that came and interviewed me, they said, look, we've got the quantity, now we need quality. And they were looking, because my heart at that time was already bent towards discipling. And they said, that's what we want. I'm like, okay, then that's what we're going to do. And so we slowly, what we said, we were careful with the things we said. We were careful with what we called discipleship. And I was also very intentional. I think we all have to be intentional with what we celebrate. Because the things that we celebrate from the pulpit, from in front of our people, to the things we post on our walls, that's what we value. And if we value fun, if we value church for church's sake, then we're going to post pictures of pretty chapels. And I'm not getting into that discussion. I'm not putting it down, but I'm just saying our people pick up on when they come into these walls and they see on our walls that we are all about activity and promotion and busyness and fun, then that's what they're going to think, this is all we're going to be doing here at this church. But if they come in and they hear us celebrating life change, if they hear us talking about the students who are starting to invite other people and they're actually sharing their faith with other students, we celebrate that from the stage because that is worthy of celebration. And so when there's a student that gets baptized, they give their life to Christ and they get baptized, that we celebrate. And I will tell you, it was tough for us. My first 3 years at that church, it was slow. And I actually had a parent come to my office and tell me, you should be fired. Oh, wow. You know what I had to do? Just like the rest of us, grin and bear it. Thank them for their opinion, as awful as it was. Thank them for it. And then ask God, what can I learn from this and help me get over it? And we pressed on. And you don't give up because it's what we were called to do, is to make disciples. And I will tell you, one of the proudest moments at that church was after about 4 or 5 years, we had our Disciple Now weekend. And after we had stayed the course and we had continued, we had every single one of our small group leaders who were college students. Every one of them was from our church. We didn't have to go outside of the church to get anybody to come in and teach our students because it was a crop of kids that we had raised, all of those parents and Sunday school teachers and volunteers. It wasn't just one person, it was all of us as a team. And we got to make that point to the whole church. Hey, church, by the way, you've made disciples of these college students, and that's why they're here investing in your students. And we celebrated as a church. And it took about 4 or 5 years for that cruise ship, that battleship to take that turn.
That's great. I love the fire is what I love. It fires you up, doesn't it?
It just about got me fired.
Well, there you go.
But it got me fired up.
Yeah. That's right.
Dog's name is Blue.
All right. I got to ask this question. This one's going to get real. Okay. Because when you're in it, it feels great, but there are failures, flops. There are things that happen along the way. And when did you know that whatever it was that you failed or you had a flop as a disciple maker, and what did God teach you from it?
How much time do we have?
I'll start. When I was pastoring in East Alabama, I realized I waited. And look, if you've waited till this point to start making disciples, there's no time like the present. But what I realized is I waited a little bit too late. And what I mean by that is culture was beginning to be created, and I hadn't poured my life into these men who would replicate. So what I was doing, I thought I was, but they weren't replicating. They weren't multiplying. And so what I had done is create a holy huddle, right? And a lot of the, roundtables have talked about that today. And I realized when they didn't multiply, and then, when I transitioned to another place, they never multiplied. I realized, man, I blew it. And so I was determined not to wait and to begin with multiplication in mind the very beginning. And so when I transitioned to another spot, that's exactly what I did. But
Beating myself up thinking that it was my fault that someone would leave a group when I was discipling them. When it was either really a spiritual decision, mature decision on their part to because of timing, or it was a fleshly, sinful, selfish choice they were making. So thinking that I was a failure based on what I was doing, when actually I was just being faithful. And just so you know, if you have a 100% rate of people staying in your groups, I'm probably not going to listen to what you have to say, because you're selling drugs or something illegal is going on. So, but I mean, if it happened to Jesus, why should we not expect it to happen to us? So,
For me, I think I felt most like a failure when I spent time and I felt like the results were up to me. That was the thing, is when they would come in and say, you know what, I didn't read the Bible this week. I thought, man, I have failed them. And then I find out, well, because my wife was in the hospital, and then you learn over time that it's a long process. And one of my challenges still to this day is to not try to fast track the process. Is we got to make disciples now. So we want to microwave these disciples, and disciples are not microwaved, they're handcrafted. And if you've ever had anything handcrafted, it's way more valuable than it is if it's mass produced. If you've ever bought anything from IKEA versus have Andy build you something, I mean, or Robert paint you something, that's something that you're going to value a lot more. And so to begin to see things from play the long game in disciple making, it's a lot more satisfying. And so don't get caught up, and don't get lost in the fact that you're going to have some times where people mess up and people blow it, or people leave the group. And it's not up to us to produce the results. It's up to us to be faithful.
I think my biggest point of failure was about 2 years ago, when we were struggling. On the outside, we looked very good, with the 3 Bs, buildings, bodies, and budgets. Everything looked really, really good. But just internally, you knew that we weren't really engaging in the word like we should. We weren't living out the one another's. We weren't sharing our faith. And so I'm crying out to the Lord one day, just kind of complaining, God, why isn't this working? I mean, I think we got a really good plan. We got a process. We got a pathway. We got everything. Why is this not working? And it's as if I just hit upside the head, and it was I could feel the Spirit of God saying, you've got everything but me. And I realized that we had not been intentional about prayer, and both personally and corporately. And so I started reading everything we could on fasting and praying, and seeking the Lord's face, and seeking the Spirit of God. Can I say that in a Baptist meeting? Okay. Because I think sometimes we really love God, we really love Jesus, and then we forget about the third member of the Trinity. And we just really, not only so for the last year or so, year and a half, it's been a lot of individual prayer, and really felt this year, God really convicted us about our corporate prayer, our collective prayer. You look at the book of Acts, and a lot of what was going on in the beginning of the book of Acts, they were praying together. Acts 1:14, they were in one accord in prayer. And, Acts 2, 42, they continued in prayer. And so they devoted themselves to prayer. And so we really felt like, okay, when we come back, our Wednesday nights, like everybody else because of COVID, disappeared. When they came back, we're not gonna talk about prayer requests for 30 minutes, pray for 3, and then have a Bible study. We're gonna pray. So we want you to come and we're gonna pray together. And so that's been the biggest lesson that I've learned. And so
I would say early on for me, it was a lack of intentionality in actually challenging the people that I was meeting with to continue this, to do it themselves. I felt like I had accomplished something just by getting them to show up at Chick-fil-A at 6 a.m. It was an accomplishment for me to show up at 6 a.m. And so I think what in their minds, and in my mind too, because this was a culture shift for me too, was we are not just sitting in a Sunday school class. This isn't just another Bible study for Bible study's sake. This is training. This is literally us training them to go and do the work. And I think for me, and this is something that I'm slowly learning, that familiarity is a huge obstacle to discipling. Because even the Israelites wanted to go back to slavery. Why? Because it was familiar. It was all they knew. And so for our people, if we're not intentionally challenging them and training them to then take this and do it also with someone else, they're just going to go right back to the slavery of religion, and hide behind another Bible study. But so we have got to come out of this mentality of, listen to me as I invest wisdom. No, let's train each other and let's go and do it. Let's continue this. And so lack of intentionality was big for me.
Well, guys, thank you. We're going to wrap this panel up, and I'm going to bring up a local pastor that's not local here, but he's local in Georgia, and I'm going to tell you about him. Thank you all so much. Let's give it for a panel. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, guys.